check one, check two.
Say
siblings.
just amaze.
Amaze. Yeah, so people got the Hail Mary reference. I was happy. Yeah.
So what did Project Hail Mary teach you about B2B SaaS?
Well, you just read my LinkedIn post.
Oh, did you?
No,
I didn't see
but
that.
That's exactly what you would see on LinkedIn.
You have to answer in rocky terms only. Welcome back to Future with Fauzi. I'm with Dan Fernandez, the VP of Product for Developer Services at Salesforce. We're currently at TDX, and we're here to talk about some announcements, including Agentforce Vibes, along with some other interesting things. So Dan, yesterday you demoed Agentforce Vibes 2.0.
Right.
And I was wondering, imagine I'm a company and I'm seeing so many different vibe coding tools. Mm-hmm. Why should I consider Agentforce Vibes as opposed to the other tools? And what's new about it that makes it maybe more unique than anything else?
Sure. So taking a step back, I think one of the key things we're trying to do is we launched a name and really had a tough time deciding what the best name to call this was. But it's called Headless 360. And the real intent is, how do we change everything we're doing in Salesforce to at least have it to be agent ready? So that means APIs, CLI, model context protocol, skills, and a number of things that we're doing within our team. So we have 30 plus skills, 60 plus MCP tools that ship out of the box. And that's, why do I say that? Is the intent is, you can choose your developer tool of choice, and all of these things are composable. In other words, you can use those skills in MCP and whatever tool you're using. Now, and then the second question is, okay, so why Agentforce Vibes? So I think one of the key things we want to do, and Vibes 2.0 I'll specifically be referring to, is if you think about sort of like Claude Code or Codex or Cursor, these are general purpose tools, right? They're sort of like the horizontal. You can do anything, but they're not sort of tailored for the specific product or service. If you are a Salesforce developer, meaning you're day in and day out, you are developing for the Salesforce platform, we wanted to give you a first-class experience that is more like a vertical integration. So what does that mean? It's pre-configured for everything. We have what's called the Agentforce Trust Layer. For a number of customers, they can't have metadata, code, or data leave the trust boundary. Like for security, compliance, and everything else. We wanted to have an agentic tool that allows you to build applications without ever leaving that trust boundary. It's just kind of one example. Two is, hey, why would I choose, Claude Code over Agentforce Vibes? With Agentforce Vibes 2.0, you don't need to choose. So one of the great things that Anthropic has done and OpenAI has done is provided not just the LLMs, right? So when we talk about LLMs, we're talking about like the sonnets of the world, Codex, and so on. That's the LLMs. They actually provide their agents. So with Agentforce Vibes 2.0, you actually have the choice of harness. So you get to pick, hey, I want you to use the Anthropic Agents SDK or the OpenAI Agents SDK. Mastra is coming soon as his client. So it really is, hey, don't make me choose between Claude Code and Agentforce Vibes because I want this. It's the same set of tools, the same agentic loop and context management and everything else, all available. Plus, the cool part is you can obviously choose. So depending on your developer task, OpenAI has very advanced tools for multiple agent management. So managing like, hey, I want to have one person be the product person, one person be the UX person. This is the PR person, the release agent, and managing a team of agents. But it lacks more of the deep thinking, while Sonnet does. So literally based on your task, you just swap the file in the configuration settings. So again, you get the sort of power of Claude Code, OpenAI, tailored for Salesforce with those skills and MCP, headless MCP tools, all running in the Agentforce Trust Layer. And that's where I had to do the rocky amaze, because it really is everything you'd want as a Salesforce developer.
So imagine you're a Salesforce customer and you're maybe a bit intimidated about where to start. Do you have any advice on maybe something simple but useful they can build to see what's possible and start building momentum?
Yeah, it's a great point. So the first thing we have is, one, how do I get started? Maybe if I'm not a Salesforce developer, we have what's called our Developer Edition org. So you basically sign up with your email and we give you, including Sonnet, free LLM requests for you to try the Salesforce platform and Agentforce Vibes. And then the second question is like, okay, what am I building? Especially if I'm a Salesforce developer, A great example is just automating a database schema. In the example that we gave, this is sort of like the crawl, walk, run. What layer do you want to do? UI, logic, or backend? I'll start just with the backend. But today in Salesforce, when you're building Salesforce objects or custom objects, it requires 7 clicks for every field. So literally in our demo, we had over 100 different fields across 10 tables, and that would mean 700 plus clicks that you would have to do manually. There's got to be a better way. And so we have the numbers, and it's 97% fewer clicks, 95% faster for you to do that agentically. And the best thing is the agents can help basically verify your database schema and actually suggest the best use of your schema, or even consider reusing existing schema. One of the biggest challenges that we have with vibe coding is people are building new things and they're not thinking about reuse. So we have a tool called the Salesforce Catalog that actually looks at, this is like the one central store for all agentic stuff, whether it's Lightning Web Components, code logic, or schema. Look at what I have with a semantic understanding of what it is, and can I reuse that or not? And it gives you sort of that option to reuse existing things. So that's sort of like the crawl, if you will, to get started for 0 to 1. And everything is available as well for step-by-step tutorials.
Okay.
And in fact, at the conference, we're putting it up as well, like a hands-on lab to walk you through as well, and Trailhead to get started as well.
Okay. So my understanding is you can build apps with Agentforce Vibes, but you can also build agents. And you mentioned the trust layer at the beginning. I'm just wondering what kind of security or observability features have you added that helps like enterprises adopt this safely to make sure that their agents aren't behaving in a weird way?
It's a great question, and honestly, I'm not the best person for all the stuff we're doing for to track agents. I'm more, how does an agent build for application development? But at a really high level, one, the trust layer has a number of things for like prompt injection, verification, and a number of other capabilities that exist there. 2 is you be able to do the session trace, and 3, everything's built on Salesforce. So let's say like we have an employee table that has everybody's salary, right? You would not want to, find some way to prompt to, hey, spit this out into into a spreadsheet for me, right? Why would that never happen? Because underneath the covers, when you're making that request goes with your user. So unless I have access, and this is because underneath the covers, we're not just saying use everything, it is the user's access role, and we have down to row level access controls, right? So when you ask it for everything, maybe I have access to mine, so the spreadsheet would have one row and it would be mine, as kind of, just thinking about what the example would be. So that is sort of the key, which is, hey, we're building an agentic system, but it automatically inherits all of the fine granular controls, the audit history, the governance, the compliance that you get with Salesforce.
Okay. Question to you about the role of the developer and how it evolves. As you build these tools that make it easier for non-developers to build the tools and software that they need, how do you see the role of developers evolving with time?
This is like the $1 million question, and it changes every 3 months. So, and it's not just developers. I love just one of the recent comparisons online, which is, hey, everybody's skills just got up-leveled. So before, a developer was like, oh, well, the product team needs to tell me what to do and to build sort of refined requirements and understand. And I had to go to the UX person to get, to have the beautiful user experience. Same thing with the user experience person. They're like, oh, well, before I had to do the requirements for the person, and I didn't have the skills to actually build the app. And the product person's like, cool, I can now build the UX, and I can actually build the code. So really, everybody's sort of more empowered to be able to build applications. And what that does is a couple things, which is, one, how do you think about, and we've been trying to understand this, which is, when are you pouring concrete, when are you pouring sand? And tell me if this resonates, which is like, these are the things that we are going to build, and it is sort of the stable foundation. Like, you don't necessarily want to vibe code the security controls or governance for that table, those are there. But you may start doing things like experimentation or using things to understand more of a product market fit. So what would that mean? Like as one example, we know a number of ISVs that are like two in a box. You get the UX person and the product person that basically are going to customers to validate ideas before it ever gets into engineering, right? Because engineering has always been the long tail for a number of areas, and really that's one that's accelerating, but two is how do we just basically find new ways to validate so we didn't build the wrong product? So the example that I use, because it is a real one, was somebody was building an agentic dashboard, and it was for executives to have the single pane of glass for executives. And they built this beautiful thing that I'm sure looks great on a 27-inch monitor. Execs are never at their desk. The entire app was effectively useless because they were like, you need to build this on mobile. And it's like, okay, now let's vibe code the Swift version, if you will. So what are the things that that team was able to validate the requirements or understand the audience better that they didn't sort of came in with preconceived notions of what that audience would actually want out of a product. So it's sort of those examples. And then from an engineering perspective, I think one of the hard parts, so we've accelerated sort of like the plan, build, and even some of the testing. But the bottleneck right now is pull requests, right? It's like, okay, great, I now have more stuff to get through. And I think you're gonna see more and more tools to agentically review. And then also, not all changes are created equal. This is kind of like the example I keep using, which is if you had an S3 bucket and it was public or private, somehow the AI decided to change that value. That should be at the absolute most, but it's buried in 600 files have changed, and it's over 10,000 changes. That one setting is absolutely critical. So not all changes are created equal. How do you sort of think about and classify the really scary changes and make sure that there's a human in the loop to review those? And what are the other tools that we can make things more verifiable? And then lastly is, hey, how does this get to production faster? This is everything from experimentation, testing, blue-green deployments, and flighting, right? So it's like, okay, I can start to trust more, but if it ever doesn't work, we really have safeguards to roll back. So the companies that I think are going to be the most successful are the ones that have like the most mature DevOps and release processes, and that have the most telemetry to tell, hey, is this thing working or not? Hey, it's returning 200 okay, but it's always empty, right? It's like, okay, the service looks green. So it's sort of really thinking about that maturity process, but I think that's where the developer's role, I think, has changed from I need to code every line of code to how do I think about enabling that? And then I think the other part is the governance. How do we basically enable teams to work together, and what does it mean to define what are the rules for our company or organization?
You touched on a few things I want to ask you more about. One of them is like anyone can build anything with these tools now. So I'm wondering, I'm kind of comparing like the Agentforce Vibes announcement with the AppExchange announcement, where like one lets you build anything, but one lets you kind of buy from other people. So from your perspective, when does it make sense to build your own software versus buy software from someone else?
It's a great question. It really varies based on our enterprise customers. Like, there's a number of customers who are like, hey, I don't want to have to maintain this. I obviously don't want my business analyst or my UX lead to be on pager duty, right?
Yeah.
So of course you're going to think about what is the right application to do that. And if you have somebody else basically doing that support, that is a great thing to basically say, okay, this is just a cost of doing business. And it's sort of the same question where there was like the thought that this apocalypse is like not real, because nobody's going to basically say, hey, look, we vibe coded this and the person left the company, and now who runs this and where's the actual code, and we don't have the prompts and everything else. So I think every company is going to do their own build versus buy. I think it's like 91% of the Fortune 500 are using some version of AppExchange apps already, right? So and a number of big partners, they are going to use that as an area to basically accelerate their development, or be like, hey, look, it's just a cost of doing business. We'll get there faster, and somebody else is worrying about it. Let me focus on the most important parts for our business. Is it core to your business, or is it sort of the cost of doing business? Is sort of just two of the decisions that we see enterprises making.
I like the example you shared about the dashboard for executives and like how they didn't use it because they're not at their desk. But I imagine a lot of product teams are asking themselves now, how can I use AI somehow to provide some sort of value? And like you said, like sometimes people will build things that others don't need or will not use. So what advice would you have for them to find like good areas of opportunity? Like, do you have a way to think about it or approach these problems?
It's a good point, and I think there's things like I probably haven't done a good job of writing it down. But there's a number of things that are happening, which is like, I gave an entire talk on this actually. No, I have written it down. I'll have to send you the slides. But I think one of the key areas is understanding from a developer's perspective, what is your strategy? And how do you think about moats? And what does a moat mean in the future? And what are the things that you are doing that is sort of the unique value prop, or sort of, you've heard the term like unfair advantage for product managers. What is the unfair advantage that you have in a single area that you can help with, and then how do you make that better? Two is understanding who your customer is, what are their needs, and having that laser focus. We have a session called True to the Core here that is the place where people can go and tell us, hey, these are the challenges we're facing, and it's sort of a great example. In fact, in that session, they were like, why don't you all go through your known issues, which are like issues that are there, and then just see if an agent could actually fix some of them. And it's like, that's a great idea. So it's one, how can you curate feedback from your product or service, and how are you getting those signals? One, do you have the sort of in-product signals? What does success look like is probably one of the biggest arguments. Is it MAU and MAO? If somebody's just using something, is it time on product? So there's a number of these areas, and they're almost like too controversial, but thinking about what is the actual measure of success. Is it the classic things on like adoption, MAU, monthly average users, maybe it's time spent on daily average users, weekly average users, and so on. Satisfaction, which is how are you measuring satisfaction? There's a couple of ways. Net Promoter Score is still very popular. How do you measure that and quantify that, and then see sort of the trends over time? Are there other ways to look at quantitative and qualitative satisfaction? And then obviously things like revenue. What's your revenue goals? And then, what are your margins and everything else? And to some extent, it's like, hey, how much do we need to build ourselves? Or are there things that we could use to get us there faster? Maybe that's a partnership. Maybe that's, hey, I found a great skill that does this, and we should just tell people to use this skill or MCP. We could write the code to integrate Jira tickets. Or there's a Jira MCP. How do we just build this and sort of have a thoughtful way to integrate that? So just thinking through sort of the end-to-end to build a product. And I think the other part is just realizing things are changing so quickly. While you can have a one-year plan, you should start doing monthly planning. And I think the ship and iterate quickly and learn is one of the key areas, which is what's the mean time to learn, and do you actually have, back to our KPIs and telemetry, do you have the telemetry to actually know whether that's impacting stuff or not? And that's probably just another key area that you have to build in. Our very first version of Agentforce for developers required you to know to install like an obscure VS Code extension, and then you had to like configure it, and we basically made it so hard for you to get started. So as opposed to, we added into our Salesforce extensions for VS Code, it's just on by default the second you connect up to an org. And that is just like an example of, you'll see your adoption go up because you're putting it where people actually are.
So you touched on my next question, which is about success metrics. You mentioned the standard ones like MAU, NPS, all that. Are there new success metrics that you've defined for, let's say, something like Agentforce Vibes, where you can't really control how the system will behave? Or do you still rely on the same metrics?
I think you kind of do both. The other one is just task success, which is like, hey, this is my job to be done, I wasn't able to do it. And it's like, okay, why? And then I think the other part that's been really interesting, and one of the reasons why we did all of these skills and MCPs, are to make task success much more modular. Take a really big thing, I want to build an app, and break it down. Okay, I'm going to need some schema. I'm going to need some business logic. I'm going to need some UI. The business logic's going to need tests, right? So we're going to write unit tests for that. The UI is going to need just unit tests. We're also going to have accessibility tests. So each of those can be broken down and composed, and then you can have a set of skills or metrics that measure the success of those tasks. So, and there are agentic tools that allow you to do this and even do things like be able to score. And this is one of the challenges we have, which is, okay, what are all the things in an agentic context? It's like I pass in the agents.md, the rules, the skills, the MCP, my specific prompt, the code file, and then the org thing, and then the specific model that I'm doing. And it's like, okay, out of that it did this, so how do you sort of define what the variables are that change this? And sometimes we find behavior where something works terrible on just one model, and we don't know. I'm not going to pick on which one. It's OpenAI or Anthropic or whatever, but it's sort of there, and it's like, why is that happening, or what is the specific issue that we're trying to do? And but having agentic ways to measure the quality of the results is another key.
Okay. Yeah,
and those things didn't exist even months ago.
Yeah. Well, one of the examples I liked yesterday was, I think it was Indeed. They showed they logged all the human in the loop interactions in its own file. I thought that was really interesting. I know we're running out of time, so I'm just going to move to my final question.
Absolutely.
And this is like very forward-looking. It doesn't have to be related to tech, but imagine it's the year 2049, and you get 3 wishes to change the world in any way you want. What would that future look like?
Oh, geez.
And it doesn't have to be related to your job. It could be anything. Very open-ended question.
Okay, so, I don't know if you've looked at the news lately, but there's just a lot of things.
Yeah.
How about
I'm
sort
aware.
of like the great, lovely utopia? So all the things that we're thinking about how technology could be used for the good of humanity would be like the dream, right? Like that's where we're going, as opposed to, I think, sort of the scaretastics of Terminator 2 or whatever. Your favorite movie is there, and I think there's a real great chance to do that, but that I think is the pretty obvious one.
Yeah. So basically, it's Project Hail Mary energy in the world.
Yeah, I mean, between that and Artemis, I think it just like got people like, I love ruthless competence. This is amazing, and look at what people can do if they sort of have accomplished a mission. So,
Dan, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
I hope to see you next year.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool.